Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a game that was played online recently, quite a controversial game, and it was played between Vladimir Kramnik and a 14-year-old, apparently from Ukraine. Obviously, Kramnik is from Russia. There's been a lot of controversy recently with Russia invading Ukraine, so there could be a little bit of bad blood. Whether that had an effect on whether Kramnik decided to report his opponent. We're going to have a look at the game in a little bit more detail and decide whether or not this player was potentially cheating. Obviously, we can't say for certain. We're going to have a look and we're going to use the engine. I'm only using Stockfish 12. It's not a top engine. However, it should be able to give us some idea as to whether or not White was cheating in this game. Let's make the board slightly larger. So White decides to play this Bishop b5, checks Sicilian. And Kramnik responds with knight d7. Bishop went back to e2, knight f6, e5. So what I tend to do is I will tend to use... everybody has their own method of measuring accuracy. Most people just use the online engines. So, for example, sites like chess.com or Lichess will give you an accuracy score. Well, the way I tend to do it is I'll tend to do it quite quickly. I'll go through it fairly quickly with the engine. I won't let it get to a huge depth. Apparently, you're supposed to let it get to like depth 30. I don't tend to let it. Can we even get it up to? Oh, we got it up to depth 27 on this. And I'll start after the opening phase. So, in my opinion, the game is probably leaving the opening phase around about this point. White's just gone queen e3. So I would say from this moment on, what I then tend to do is look and see how often the top move matches. So the move played in the game matches the top three choices of the engine. Because I think that's a fairly accurate way to look at the game. At the moment, we got up to depth 29, so we've got one more. Apparently, we've got to get up to at least depth 30 to really get an accurate measure. Knight c5 is coming up as one of the top moves by Black. Can we get it up to depth 30? It's on depth 30, and Knight c5 is coming up the second best choice. Okay, so in this position, White played Knight c3. How long will it take us to get up to depth 30? Notice there's also, if you see in the right-hand column, people have possibly inputted this game and analysed it with cloud engines before. Knight c3 is initially coming up as one of the top choices. That's a fairly obvious move, right? We're now on depth 26. It's a fairly obvious move. It's not really a move. It could still be in theory. We could still be in theory. I'm not sure. But we could still be in theory at this point. Knight c3 was played by White. We're on depth 26. We're going to try and get up to depth 30. On depth 27. So again, you know, that's my way of measuring accuracy. I put this game into Lichess just now. And the game came up with a 94% accuracy level for White. Quite a low accuracy level for Kramnik by comparison with his normal games. We're now up to depth 29. We keep going. We're depth 29 out of 38. I don't know what that means, 29. I don't understand what these numbers... Maybe someone can explain to me what these numbers means. We've got 29, 38. I don't know what that means. 29, 40. I wish I could calculate this well. I think a lot of my problems will be behind me. Knight c3. So we've got up to move 30 and Knight c3 is top move. So we're only really going to look at the top moves for White because Kramnik lost the game. Nobody's accusing him of cheating, but he did accuse his opponent or suggest him to imply that his opponent was cheating. Because on the stream, he immediately, as soon as he lost the game, he immediately reported his opponent by clicking on the submit this game, report this opponent for cheating. So h3 is initially coming up as the top move. However, we get to depth 30. Again, h3 is a very thematic move here. It's not really a very unusual move, h3, in my opinion. Some people said stop. Somebody said on a recent video, said stop this. It's impossible to cheat at Rapid and Blitz, which I found a strange comment. I don't know whether the guy was trolling, but I think what Kramnik is doing is opening a discussion. But whether he's opening a discussion because we got up to move 30, and actually depth 30 h3 has dropped. No, it's come back up again. So it's gone up to number 1, but there's a few moves that are about the same. h3, according to the engine, is the only move that gives a slight edge. Every other move is equal. So there's a 50. What it says, the numbers there on the left-hand side, when it says 50%, 56%, that means if an engine played the engine from here, there'd be a 56% probability of a white win. I believe. Is that right? It's done on percentages anyway. Anyway, white played h3, so that's in our top 3 choices. So black plays b5, and white here plays b4. This is the first moment I thought, yeah, maybe Kramnik's onto something, because b4 is a very kind of computerish move. It's very concrete. It looks like you're weakening the position. But on the other hand, you're chasing away the knight. I mean, a move like rook d1 looks more human to me. So b4. And again, people accuse Kramnik. We're going to wait again. We're going to wait till it gets to depth 30. Does b4 pop up as the top move? If we get to depth 30. Let's have a little look. It's on depth 25 at the moment. Again, I don't really know what it means by depth. Obviously, if you've got a super strong engine, they can get to these higher depths quicker. Whatever that means, I don't understand any of it really. But b4 to me is a slightly inhuman move. Although the idea is, to be honest, is also, you have to admit, it's rather thematic in these positions to play this move b4. It's well known in these kind of structures that b4 and a4 is a possible plan. So again, I might be being a bit harsh, but, and the guy is, bear in mind that this 14-year-old is a talented player. He's 26, over 2600 on chess.com. I'm not sure what his name was again, but he's a very good player. Again, yeah, these accusations, videos created and everything against this kid could be affecting him. b4 is initially coming up. What depth? We're at depth 29, so we're going to wait till we get to depth 30. Could be in for a long haul here. b4. The anticipation is overwhelming. Yeah, we're on depth 29, 54, and again, no idea what the 54 stands for. If anyone knows, let me know in the chat. Yeah, depth 30, b4 comes at the top move. Right, very interesting. Right, so knight e6, and a4 is initially coming up as a top move. Again, it kind of fits with b4, right? You've gone b4 to fix the pawn on b5, now you're going to attack it, a4. I think a4, once you've gone b4, a4 is more obvious to a human player. a4, we're on depth 24 out of 37. And again, you know, somebody uses a computer online, they might not be going, obviously they're not going up to these depths, they're not waiting for the machine, they're just coming up with, if they were cheating, if they were smart cheating, they're not waiting for the computer to go to this depth, they're just playing the first move that pops up. You know, because you don't have time, obviously, to wait online. But on the other hand, they could be using a much more powerful engine than I'm using. That's another option as well. So I think it's worth looking to see if the moves go up. Initially, a4 is coming up as the top choice. So we're going to wait a little bit. As I said, it could be a long video. Just think of my voice as a kind of ASMR. It's like an ASMR channel, right? It's a relaxing voice. It's hypnotizing you. But yeah, a lot of people say with Kramnik that, you know, he makes his accusations falsely, and a lot of it's to do with his personal pride and his ego, which I think is partly true. But I think it's also worth mentioning. People are too quick to dismiss. if you look at someone like Kramnik, he spent a whole career working with engines, and he practiced against engines a lot. He would use engines extensively to analyze. He played against very strong engines in very well documented matches. Was it Deep Fritz or something like that? It was a Brains in Bahrain, very famous match that he played against an engine. He spent many months preparing for that match with powerful engines. So this is somebody who understands. I do think you get a kind of a feel for it. When you worked a lot with engines, I think you get a kind of a feel for when something's not quite right. But on the other hand, I've often played games in the past, and when you're completely in the zone or whatever, you play very accurately, because you've been spent a lot of time working with engines. So it could well be this kid spends a lot of time working with engines himself, therefore he ends up looking like an engine. A4 is coming up as top move on depth 30. Interesting. Now, rook A4 is not initially the top move. It's coming up as number 3. I personally might be tempted to take with the knight, because then you can go c4 in some positions, and you're also hitting the b6 square. You also potentially might be going knight b6. So I probably would have taken back with the knight, but he decided to take back the rook. However, when you leave it on for a little bit longer, it does come up with rook a4 as potentially better than knight a4. There's also rook d1 the engine is flirting with. Rook takes a4. It quite likes rook takes a4 as an interesting move. But I do think this discussion needs to be had, because I think we're at I think what Kramnik says is very true, because we're at a crossroads with chess to a certain extent, where we've had a change really over the last few years since the pandemic. There's a lot more money in online events. It's become a much more serious activity than it was. Therefore, cheating should be viewed as being much more serious. Essentially what Kramnik is saying. And I agree with him. Yeah, rook a4 has dipped a bit, but there's not much difference. Actually, the top move is rook d1. So if you were really cheating, you'd probably go rook d1, right? It's a very obvious move. But on the other hand, if you feel like you just want to cheat to keep an advantage, you might think rook a4 is just as good. We're going to wait until it gets to depth 30, but it looks like rook d1 is going to come up as a top move. In fact, rook a4 has dropped off a bit. Doesn't like rook a4 as much. Yeah, I do think we need to take cheating. My theory would be, maybe for any tournaments involving money like Title Tuesday, everybody should play on a Zoom call, and there should be extensive access to your computer, in terms of you could even have people in the room. I think, let's face it, right? Some people are winning thousands and thousands of pounds on tournaments like Title Tuesday. We've got to move 30, by the way. It's rook a4. Rook a4 is coming up as the third best option. Interesting. So that wasn't the best option. Now white plays bishop b2. And that is not coming up as one of the top moves. So bishop b2 apparently is some kind of mistake. No, hang on. We've got to go back, right? So we've got to think, does bishop b2 even ping as yeah, it's coming up with moves like b5. It likes b5 pressing on a6 weakness already. Again, very computer-like move. b5, very direct. Yeah, so my theory would be, given that there's thousands and thousands of pounds in Title Tuesday, how much is it really costing chess.com to send somebody around somebody's house? I mean, you know, Nakamura lives in America. Is it going to cost that much? He wins a lot of money in Title Tuesday. Is it asking that much to send someone around to his house and view his laptop while he's playing? He might object to this. But there's a lot of money involved. Not just Nakamura, I'm talking about everybody. Like Hans Niemann. Hans Niemann's now number 3 in online Blitz. However, at the recent over the board rapid and blitz in the blitz tournament, wasn't really anywhere. I mean, I don't think he was up there with the top guys. Magnus Carlsen won the over the board blitz. I don't think he played Neiman at all in either the rapid or the blitz, and yet Neiman is number 3 on 9. We're up depth 30 and he's not coming up with bishop b2. So this is a good sign for this kid. He didn't find the top move. However, we carry on. Obviously, if you're smart cheating, you might decide I'm not going to cheat on every single move, right? Because that would be too much of a ping. You know, that would be too much of a signal. So bishop c4 is coming up as the top move. Yeah, the knight is attacking the bishop. You don't want to allow the bishop to be exchanged. On the other hand, you might think, actually, the knight exchanging the bishop might be a good thing. So that would be my theory. I think this is one thing we could do is chess.com could be much more proactive about how they view people's computer screen, because that is effectively the key to the whole thing. If you've got online cheats, there's no way really of detecting it unless you can actually view their computer screen. All you can do is run algorithms. If someone's smart cheating, how do you catch them? They might only cheat once a tournament. They might cheat one move per tournament. That's going to boost them slightly, right? They might boost 2 or 3 times a game. How are you going to? You might have algorithms to say, look, this guy is definitely cheating. I think a lot of their algorithms are based on performing above your baseline level, above your average level. But if you're already performing at a pretty high level, the algorithm might not ping you. So I think that they need to be more proactive about sending people around. And I think all money tournaments should be played on Zoom, or where there's video. What I disagree with is when chess.com run tournaments like Title Tuesday, depth 30, bishop c4 is pinging as the top move, and clearly the top move as well. So rook fa1, a bit of a cold-blooded move, not worried about the sacrifices. A lot of people would panic and play. They'd be worried about a move like knight g2. You'd see that you ping. So you might consider a move like knight d2 exactly, just to defend against his coming attack because the queen is coming across. Instead, white went rook fa1, which is, interestingly enough, is coming up as the top move. Very cold-blooded move, but kind of a natural move because you're developing a rook and you're also attacking a6. So on depth 30... Yeah, so I think yeah. So what I was saying was on Zoom calls, they will put people on Zoom calls who they suspect. However, that is obviously whoever's on the Zoom call is gonna feel very uncomfortable, right? Because you know that you'll be watched by chess.com. You're not gonna feel like, and you know it's a kind of an unfair advantage of people who aren't playing on that Zoom call. Have a bit of an unfair advantage. So yeah, that is an issue. I mean, a friend of mine, Richard Pert, he said he played an entire Title Tuesday on a Zoom call, and that was the week after he was effectively accused by Kramnik, or Kramnik was insinuating that he was cheating in a sarcastic comment. And he didn't do as well. Now, whether he didn't do as well because he didn't have access to his engine, or or whether he was actually just very upset about having to be put on a Zoom call. But I think there should be like fairness, right? If you're going to put some people on a Zoom call, you need to put everybody on a Zoom call. But obviously they don't want to do that, because the reason they don't want to do that is because that would put people off playing Title Tuesday. I think, well, I'm playing Title Tuesday as a relaxed event. I can just turn up whenever I like. Don't have to rig up the webcam or anything, have people watching me. Or you might be I'm a shy person. I don't like going on Zoom calls with people I don't know. So it's an awkward situation, the whole online thing. It's a very kind of an unknown at the moment. So rook fa1, depth 29 is actually, the top move. But there's a few that are equal to it. Knight d2 is equal to it. Bishop b5 is equal to it. Bishop b5 looks more like an engine move. Rook fa1, although that's kind of cold-blooded, it's also kind of a human move as well. So that wouldn't necessarily ping me as that's a bit suspicious that he's gone rook fa1. We're on depth 29. We're going to wait till it gets up to depth 30. We're on depth 30, and rook fa1 is coming up as the top move, or one of the top moves. So knight takes g2 was played. Was that actually? Yeah, that was one of the top moves actually. Rook b8, But rook b8 was a better move by Kramnik. He went a bit gung-ho here. Maybe I saw him calculating the variations. They did look reasonably promising for white, for black, if you take on g2. But often you can do that at blitz. You get sucked into the sacrifice. You don't see a follow-up. You know, at blitz, you're like, well, it's blitz. It doesn't really matter. I'll just play that move. You know, it looks interesting. I'll give it a punt. So obviously, king takes. I'm not really going to bother to analyse that to depth 30 because it's obviously the only move. Well, there's only one legal move, king g1, so there's no point. Knight g4. Now, it's interesting here that white played bishop f1. This was an interesting moment. It's the only move that actually gives a big edge. But to me, that's not so obvious. I mean, I think in a blitz game, I might well just play queen e2 automatically. It's interesting that white paused it a little bit and then play bishop f1. Because queen e2 actually leads to a better position for black. So again, do we need to get to depth 30 with this? It's very clear that bishop f1 is the best move. I don't think that depth 30 is going to change that, right? It's only on depth 22 at the moment. I don't know why it's taking so long to climb to depth 30. I don't think, yeah, because actually every other move is losing. Like queen e2 is just losing. So bishop f1 is an amazing defensive move by white. Black played queen h5, and now again queen e2 is not the top move according to the engine. The top move is queen d3. But again, you might see the queen e2. Now queen e2 is now climbed. So when on this is the interesting thing on Lichess, it gives queen e2 has been inaccurate. However, if you're running an engine, it might give you a different score. So actually now, no, it's changed again. Queen e2 is coming up as the top move, but there's not much in it. It could change again. It could well be the queen d3. Yeah, queen d3 is now promoted to number 1, but they both look about the same, right? But there's not really. I mean, the only other move is queen d2, and I don't think queen e2 is a particularly suspicious move because firstly you've obviously got to move the queen, right? You've obviously got to move the queen. You're probably not going to go to d2 because you instinctively want to defend a knight. So there's only really two choices, which are queen e2 and queen d3. So yeah, going back to the thing about Kramnik, I mean, I do think it's worthwhile what he's doing in a way because he's basically saying that online chess has changed. I think people like Kramnik have an intuitive sense when something's off. So he might be wrong sometimes. The problem is you could argue the times when he's wrong is potentially harming somebody's career. He's insinuating that they're cheating. He's throwing mud against them. I don't really mind that. I mean, if Kramnik accused me of cheating, I'd probably, and I knew I wasn't, I'd take it as a compliment because I'd be like, well, he thinks that I'm playing phenomenal chess. Yeah, it's dipping now. Queen e2 on a higher depth. But again, if you're cheating online and you see queen e2, initially queen e2 is coming out as good as queen d3. So, well, queen e2 is good enough, right? And it's initially giving me an edge. So we're going to wait till we get to depth 30. There's not much difference, actually. There's plus 74. So 74% chance. If you simulate this game 100 times between two engines, there's a 74% chance that white would win and 26% for a draw or loss. I think that's how it works. Yeah, there's not much. It's probably not going to change, right? It's queen e2 is yeah, coming out as 69%. So slightly worse than queen d3, which is 77%. Well, clearly worse, you could argue. But they're both clearly better for white. Yeah, I wouldn't. Queen e2 would not peg as. But bishop f1 to me was a little bit suspicious. Queen e2, not so much. Because you're going to have to move the queen, right? I mean, I think a lot of good, decent blitz players are going to find queen e2, queen d3. But yeah, I do think with stronger players, they have probably a better feel. Obviously, that's not the be all and end all. You can't say, well, somebody's gut feeling is enough to kind of default somebody. There would have to be some kind of ping with the algorithm as well. Um, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of suspicions about a very famous. Yeah, step 30. Queen d3 is clearly ahead, but Queen e2. Okay, so black went f5, which is a natural attacking move, good attacking move, and white went bishop g2 as the initial best move. Again, not sure about bishop g2 whether I would say that's suspicious. It's hard to say. You could take on f5 is another option that looks quite natural, but bishop g2, it's impressive that white saw that so quickly in the game. We're on depth 24, it's coming out. Again, probably don't have to wait till he gets. It's clearly the best move at the moment. It's not. I don't think it's going to change that much if we get to depth 30. So bishop g2, top move by white. Bishop b7. Now b5 was the top move. Wow, and he played it fairly quickly. To me, again, b5 is not so obvious. But you're fighting back. I mean, I'll be looking at moves like taking on f5. And one of the reasons why I might want to take on f5 is that if I then go b5, the rook is coming across the fourth rank. So b5 on depth 24. Let's see if it changes. It probably won't. Yeah, so when Rousis was, there was this very strange incident with Rousis. And Lawrence Trent first alerted to me to this because he made a tweet on Twitter. And he sarcastically congratulated Rousis. It seemed like he said, "Wow, Rousis has got over 2600, incredible improvement. He's in his 60s, in his 50s at that time. So when he started his improvement, he was a little bit older than I am now. I think he's like in his early 50s, and he was rated somewhere in the 2400s. And he went after a few years of winning lots of European Opens and very rarely losing." He'd moved to Czech Republic by this point. He was based in Central Europe. And b5 is coming at top move and white is winning. Interesting. Yeah, again, yeah. So maybe Kramnik's intuition was actually spot on. But again, you could equally argue that b5 is a natural move. It's hard to say. I think you would need more evidence probably than this game. Yeah, so he had a few years where he was basically, what he would do is modus operandi is apparently he would go to the toilet and use his phone. I actually think that he had maybe a more sophisticated method than that, where he was cheating at the board somehow, because I'm not sure if you could avoid, even if you're going to the toilet a lot and using your phone, I'm not sure you could avoid defeat so much and get all the perfect results you wanted. If you were just using that method. Because you might only do that 2 or 3 times a game. Obviously, it would improve your results, but whether it would improve your results where you were able to get to 2600 plus, I'm not sure. There was example, Navarra was talking about how he played Rousis in something like a league match, and Rousis offered him a draw where probably Rousis was slightly better, but he already suspected that Rousis was going to the toilet a lot and cheating. So given that Rousis was starting to get short of time, he declined his draw offer. And Rousis, by the end of the game, couldn't go to the toilet at all. So in the time scramble, Navarra outplayed him and won. So this was Rouse's modus operandi, was that he would generally draw with the stronger players, the GMs. He didn't want to trigger people too much or make it too obvious by beating a lot of GMs. So, it kind of made sense. So people looked at him and they were saying he was rating farming. But you can't rate and farm that much. You're going to drop points against people who are 2,000 occasionally. You're going to drop points against people who are 2,100, 2,300. Rousis was never doing that. And when I looked at his games, they were very clean. So I made these observations online at places like Twitter, and it's very strange response. People were getting very, very upset about what I was saying. They were saying, it's very clear that Rousis has just improved a lot. You're just jealous. You're stupid and all this. And you got to accept the fact that people can just improve. And I even spoke to grandmaster colleagues around about that time, and they were, some of them were like, well, you don't realise that people could just improve a lot now with engines, studying with engines a lot. So, well, you've been playing professional chess for 30 odd years. You know, is it realistic to think he gets into his early 50s, he's really going to improve that much? So I think by the end he was up to 2670 before he got caught. So again, I do think that players like myself who've worked a lot with engines, you get an instinctive feel when something's not right. By the way, we're at way over depth 30, so I'm babbling a lot. B5 was top move. A5, and again, rook takes A5. Interestingly enough, that's not coming up as a top move. The top move is to take on F5. So we're going to wait on this one as well to see if it gets to depth 30, whether rook A5 suddenly gets up there. It doesn't like rook A5. So that was an inaccuracy by white. He should have taken on F5. So again, a good positive side for white. That possibly wasn't cheating, because if he had been cheating, he probably would have taken on F5. That was the better move. Rook A5 was a mistake. Yeah, I mean, you do have to be careful with this stuff. It's like, yeah, it's a delicate one, because on the one hand, I do agree with Kramnik. I do think that, you know, online chess is changing a lot, and I think we need to be very careful about cheating. On the other hand, you know, raising suspicions about people and throwing mud against them is also not good either, unless you have direct evidence. You know, every time you lose to someone who's lower rated, you're going, well, that guy's a cheat, you know, or your attack goes wrong, that guy's a cheat, this guy's a cheat. Is not a good way to go about things. Yeah, we're waiting a little bit. E takes F5 is a better move, and I think the reason is you immediately get the square on E4 for the knight, so the knight can jump back to G3. So when you take on F5, if the rook was to recapture, you'd have the option potentially going knight E4, threatening knight G3, hitting the queen and the rook, and then white would just be winning. In fact, in a longer game, in a classical game, I think that's the first move I'd look at. I'd look at E takes F5. And with the idea of knight E4, because you're still worried about black's attack. You probably wouldn't take on A5 in a long play game, in a classical game. So, okay, we're at depth 28. We've not got up to depth 30 yet. I think there's one or two moments in this game that do strike me as being slightly suspicious. However, the fact that white took on A5 here, he also went bishop B2 earlier, which was inaccurate. Yeah, it's starting to make me think maybe he wasn't cheating. But it's very hard to say based on one game. You would need more evidence. And again, there is an argument with smart cheaters that they'll cheat in certain games, but not in others. That's another argument that people have made. So, you know, you could say that maybe he look at some other games, that he might be innocent in his other games. But this game he decided he's playing Kramnik. He hates Russians because he's Ukrainian, therefore he's cheating. But that's a silly argument. So at depth 30, rook takes A5 is not coming up as one of the top 4 choices. Something of a mistake. And the reason is that black missed a good opportunity here. He took on A5, which is correct. So computer's frozen. Yeah, now he had the opportunity to play bishop H4. Although on a higher depth, when the computer starts thinking for a while, it starts to realise that white's firmly in control anyway. So bishop H4 you could take and go rook A7, but then there's counterplay with F takes E4. And then go, yeah, that's interesting counterplay, because the whole point about black setup is really to try and undermine the knight on F3. You've got to try and... That knight on F3 is really killing the black counter-attack. So bishop H4 makes sense in that regard. You're attacking F2. I'm not sure that Kramnik really considered bishop H4. It's sort of a move that you would spot in a classical game. But in a blitz game, it's easy to miss. So Kramnik went D5. That was a bad move. And now white took on D5 confidently. That was coming up as a top move. Okay. We could wait a bit to get to move, but again, I think that's obviously just an obvious move. There's no point waiting till it gets to move 30 because it's going to peg as one of the top choices, I would guess. I mean, by now, white has more than one way of winning the game. But knight d5 is good enough. Yeah, knight takes... I think Kramnik's idea was to go bishop c5. But then he seemed to change his mind. I think his idea was to liberate the bishop on e7. It's actually knight d5 has dropped slightly. It's now giving e takes d5 as the top move. So it's interesting. Yeah, that's a good example where it does actually... Now it's coming up again. Knight d5 is coming up as a top move. So when it's saying 100%, it means there's a 100% probability. If you play this game out 100 times between a computer of the same strength, if Stockfish 12 plays Stockfish 12 from this position 100 times, it would win 100 times out of 100, which is interesting. Well, he'd probably beat me with black 100 times out of 100 from this position, to be honest. So, you know, I'm not sure how relevant that is to human play, but it's relevant in terms of the evaluation. So e takes d5 is coming up as a top move when you run it to depth 29. Knight d5 is dipped slightly. It's now there's a 1% chance that black might escape, which I'm doubting, to be honest, but that's what the computer says. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how it calculates these probabilities. I think they're just based on how it evaluates the position. Obviously, you're not going to play this game out 100 times. You're probably not going to play the position out 100 times with a computer versus a computer. It's on depth 30. Knight d5 is coming out as the second best choice. E takes d5 is superior. Again, e d5, that's too obvious. No point looking at that to depth 30 because it's obviously that's yeah, you need to take out the bishop. So, although interestingly enough, knight e5 was also winning, which is not on the move. If you played knight e5, then you would start to think that guy's using an engine. e4, rook a7. Also d6, there's several ways to win it. d6, rook a7 is the most natural move, most energetic move. You're hitting the bishop. Yeah, and rook a7. He saw that move. So the game ended fairly abruptly by this point. Queen e6, obviously a very obvious move, and really the only move you would consider, because you're not going to take on e7 because of queen h2 and queen g2, where black's got an obvious counterattack. Well, maybe even f takes g2 was also an option, but certainly you could take with g2 with a queen, so you could go queen e7, queen h2, king f1. In fact, the computer there gives knight e3 as the top move. Wow. And black is winning. Because I'm thinking queen g2, funny enough, you get away. Queen g2, king e1, queen f2, king d1, knight e3, you have queen e3. Queen e3, rook e7, king h8, rook takes g7, sorry, king h8, and in fact, are you winning then? Maybe you're mating, you just go rook g5 check, right? And there's forced mate. But black has better move, knight e3. So queen e7 is clearly a bad move, but queen e6 is just winning by force. Because if king h8, very important that you have bishop takes g7. King takes, queen e7, rook f7, you just wipe everything out, and then you go bishop h3 at the end, even stronger than bishop takes f3. Any human, again, like this line, where he gives king here, very obvious to a human player. Well, bishop e5 is also strong. Very obvious to a human player, you have this option. And queen e7. You can't move the king, you're going to get checkmated, so you have to block. And here, yeah, I think any human player would go bishop f3, which is also winning, right? Why the hell would you go bishop h3? Again, very obvious example of computer play. So again, if you play somebody who plays moves like bishop h3, which is very inhuman. That is kind of maybe pegging as somebody who's using an algorithm because is using an engine. Sorry, because you know any human here, I think, would go bishop takes f3. So white played queen e6, black played rook f7, and now it's a forced mate, rook a8 check. It's not forced mate actually. I think it's just a wipeout. Rook takes f8. So the idea is after rook takes f8, if you take with a king, there's bishop a3. No, it is forced checkmate actually. Yeah. So Kramnik resigned in disgust after rook takes f8. So the question is, was this a game where white was cheating? I think the jury's out. I think, you know, on probability, you'd have to say probably not. However, I wouldn't completely discount the possibility that white was cheating. There were a couple of moves that, you know, there was very brutal play by white in the whole game, actually. b4 was kind of brutal and very almost engine-like. All this very brutal stuff with rook e1, allowing a capture on g2. Later on with b5, very direct. I mean, it looks obvious. It looks obvious, but that is what good play does. It makes it look simple. Is a 2600 player on chess.com capable of playing like this with white without using an engine? Absolutely. But that doesn't preclude the possibility that they were cheating. It just, I think you would need more evidence than this one game. But I can understand why Kramnik was triggered by this game, why he felt that this game was a bit suspicious. It did look a little bit like playing a brutal engine that basically sees through all your attacking ideas and refutes your play. And I think the other thing I would say about Kramnik is I think he has a low regard. I'm sure he'd have a low regard for my chess. You know, he'd regard me as a weak GM. I think he has a low regard for a lot of players and like FMs. You know, he's always going on about how these FMs are getting these really monstrously high accuracy scores online, how they're getting these incredible ratings, and so. And I do think that's a bit suspicious as well. I agree with Kramnik. On the other hand, what Nakamura was saying the other day, which is that Kramnik doesn't seem to appreciate the fact that people are just much stronger now. Like we've seen a new generation come through with a pandemic, and people are much stronger. Is also a relevant point as well. You know, I do think that's something worth mentioning. That yeah, we've seen a different generation now, and people are just much stronger than they were back in the day. So yeah, interesting anyway. Interesting observations about the game. I might do more analysis of these kind of. I know these kind of videos are controversial, but we need a bit of controversy in chess. We need a bit of drama to spice it up. So please leave your comments down below what you thought about this game. I suspect most people will say the usual line about Kramnik is like gone crazy, and I actually don't think he has. I think he's actually making very valid points. Okay, maybe he's not completely going about it in the most correct way, but I think it's a point worth mentioning.